What began as a public execution in London became a horrifying warning to the entire world, as condemned pirates slowly strangled beneath hemp nooses before their corpses were locked inside iron gibbets and left to rot above the Thames for years, proving that the Crown intended to kill not only the pirates themselves, but the very legend of piracy forever.
Enjoy the video, and don't forget to subscribe.
Trace your finger along the map from Nassau toward London and picture the year 1722 as the smell of rotting oak, boiling pine tar, damp hemp rigging, stale bilge water, sulfur residue, and wet iron drifted across the grey Thames beneath a sky heavy with rain. Every snapping square sail and every creaking yardarm reminded sailors that the Golden Age of Piracy was collapsing beneath relentless pressure from the Royal Navy. Public executions had become more than punishment. They were carefully engineered spectacles designed to terrify entire maritime communities into obedience. On the morning chosen for what many contemporaries described as one of the most brutal pirate executions ever witnessed, thousands crowded the muddy riverbanks near Execution Dock long before sunrise. Merchants, apprentices, dock workers, sailors, women carrying children, and government officials packed every available wharf while small boats floated in the tidal current for a better view. Nearby rested armed sixth-rate warships of nearly 500 tons displacement, their hulls built from thick English oak futtocks, secured with hand-forged iron spikes exceeding 11 inches in length beneath pronounced tumble-home, designed to strengthen resistance against enemy shot. Bronze demi-culverins cast from roughly 88% copper and 10% tin rested silently aboard polished naval gun carriages, their barrels blackened by repeated firing with powder composed of approximately 75% saltpeter, 15% charcoal, and 10% sulfur. The condemned pirates had once sailed beneath articles of agreement promising equal shares of plunder and compensation for wounds. Yet now those promises meant nothing beneath the authority of the Crown as chains rattled against swollen wrists while the slow tide carried them toward the gallows built beside the water itself. The execution platform had been constructed from massive oak beams nearly 12 inches square, reinforced with iron straps whose rivets had been hammered white-hot before cooling into an unyielding frame capable of supporting several bodies simultaneously without shifting beneath their combined weight. The rope prepared for each prisoner measured roughly 1 inch in diameter, twisted from tightly laid hemp fibers soaked repeatedly in tar to resist moisture from the river air. Unlike ordinary criminals, pirates convicted of robbery upon the high seas faced the Admiralty's notorious short drop hanging, a method intended not to break the neck quickly but to cause prolonged death through slow strangulation. As each condemned man climbed the rough wooden steps under heavy guard, spectators could hear the scrape of iron shackles against weathered planks, polished smooth by countless previous executions. The presiding officials read the formal charges aloud, listing acts committed without valid letters of marque, attacks upon merchant convoys, murder of civilian crews, seizure of cargoes worth thousands of pounds sterling, and repeated violations of maritime law. Each sentence echoed across the river while gulls circled overhead, their cries blending with the groaning of anchored merchant ships whose standing rigging stretched beneath damp wind. Some pirates stared defiantly toward the crowd, others whispered hurried prayers, while several silently examined the nooses hanging inches from their faces, understanding every knot and splice because many had once rigged similar hemp aboard their own sloops during long Atlantic crossings. Around them, the crowd remained almost silent, sensing that this punishment was intended not only to end lives, but to erase the very legend of piracy through carefully orchestrated fear. At the signal, the supports were withdrawn, and the condemned men dropped only a short distance before the hemp ropes snapped taut with violent force, tightening around their throats rather than breaking their necks. Their bodies convulsed as instinct forced every muscle to struggle for breath, while iron fetters hanging from their ankles added weight that increased the crushing pressure against the windpipe. Witnesses recorded that some remained conscious for many agonizing minutes, their boots scraping uselessly through empty air as faces darkened from deep crimson to bluish black. Every movement caused the coarse hemp fibers to grind against sweat-soaked skin, while the knot behind the jaw shifted slightly under the body's weight. Nearby Royal Navy Marines stood motionless with fixed bayonets mounted upon smoothbore muskets nearly 5 feet long, ensuring no rescue attempt could interrupt the spectacle. The river itself continued rising with the incoming tide, carrying the smell of salt, mud, decaying timber, and fish beneath the scaffold. Behind the gallows, merchant vessels loaded with sugar, tobacco, indigo, and rum waited for favorable currents, their captains deliberately watching the execution because the Crown wanted every master and sailor to understand the consequences of abandoning lawful trade for piracy. The condemned had once commanded swift sloops of 80 to 120 tons whose hulls required constant careening. Oakum hammered deep into every seam with caulking irons before boiling pine tar sealed the planking against seawater. Those same experienced seamen who had mastered storms, navigation, and naval combat now found every skill utterly useless as death advanced slowly beneath the relentless tension of the rope. Death alone was not considered sufficient. Once physicians confirmed that no heartbeat remained, the bodies were lowered only long enough to be stripped of personal belongings before blacksmiths fastened heavy wrought iron cages known as gibbets around the corpses. Each cage weighed close to 100 pounds, its curved iron bands shaped to imprison the ribs, spine, arms, and legs while allowing wind and rain to pass freely through the frame. Hoisted once more by block and tackle, the bodies were suspended high above the Thames where every incoming vessel could see them from miles away. Salt carried inland by the tide mixed with rain and sunlight, slowly preserving portions of flesh while birds tore relentlessly at exposed tissue. Ravens, crows, and gulls gathered daily, their beaks stripping away muscle until pale bone emerged through weathered clothing that flapped endlessly in the coastal wind. The iron itself oxidized beneath constant moisture, leaving reddish streaks that stained both cage and skeletal remains. Captains entering London were expected to sail directly beneath these grim warnings, their crews forced to look upward at the silent figures swinging above the river. Many young sailors later admitted that the sight terrified them more than enemy broadsides, because the gibbets transformed piracy from a legend of gold and freedom into a vision of slow decay. The Admiralty understood psychology as well as naval warfare. Every creaking chain, every clatter of iron against bone, every foul odor drifting across the tide served as a deliberate extension of royal authority, reminding all who passed that the Crown intended to destroy not merely pirate crews, but the very mythology that had drawn desperate men beneath the black flag. The campaign achieved its greatest effect, not through a single execution, but through relentless repetition across the Atlantic world between approximately 1718 and 1726. After the deaths of notorious captains such as Blackbeard in November 1718, and numerous pirate crews captured around the Bahamas, Jamaica, Virginia, and the approaches to the English Channel, governments coordinated naval patrols, intelligence networks, and admiralty courts with unprecedented efficiency. Fast naval sloops carrying 12 to 20 guns hunted vessels once considered impossible to catch, while improved signaling systems allowed merchant convoys to summon escorts before pirate raiders could isolate their prey. Crews that had previously relied upon carefully maintained hulls with pronounced tumble-home, seasoned oak futtocks, hand-forged chain plates, and meticulously tarred standing rigging increasingly, found themselves outnumbered by disciplined naval squadrons operating under centralized command. Even the democratic articles of agreement that had once distinguished pirate society became sources of suspicion, as fear encouraged informers to betray former shipmates in exchange for pardons or reward money. Ports that had quietly traded with outlaws now denied them fresh water, powder, sailcloth, and provisions, leaving damaged sloops unable to complete essential careening or replace worn hemp shrouds before the next voyage. The spectacle of public execution amplified every military victory because rumors traveled faster than official proclamations. Sailors arriving from London carried vivid descriptions of strangling ropes, iron gibbets, and skeletal remains left swaying above tidal waters for months or even years, convincing countless wavering seamen that the promise of Spanish silver could no longer outweigh the certainty of an agonizing and unforgettable death. By the late 1720s, the Golden Age of Piracy had largely collapsed beneath the combined weight of relentless naval patrols, harsher admiralty justice, and public executions designed to inspire lasting fear rather than simple punishment. The most brutal pirate executions ever recorded became symbols of the Crown's determination to reclaim the seas, proving that for many pirates the final voyage ended not in battle or buried treasure, but beneath a hemp noose and inside an iron gibbet overlooking the cold waters of the Thames.